Hospitals are supposed to save lives. But some wards keep secrets they can't explain. In the dead of night, when the halls are empty and the lights flicker, there are places you should never go. Some rooms haven't seen patients in years, but someone, or something, still waits inside. From locked doors that open on their own, to doctors who never left the operating table. These are the true nightmares that happen after visiting hours. Tonight, we'll take you inside 5 terrifying hospital stories. And you might never look at a hospital the same way again. The night nurse who wasn't there, it was a freezing winter night at St. Mary's Hospital. The heating system struggled to keep the wards warm, and every breath Emily took came out in a faint mist. The emergency ward was unusually quiet. Most patients were asleep, the monitors beeped softly. The fluorescent lights above buzzed with a low hum, flickering occasionally. Nurse Emily was on the night shift, walking the long, sterile corridors with her clipboard. She liked nights like this. Calm, predictable, nothing out of the ordinary. But at exactly 2:15 a.m., she heard footsteps. They were slow, heavy, and strangely rhythmic. Thump, thump, thump. They didn't sound like the quick steps of a doctor or the steady pace of the security guard. Emily turned the corner and froze. A woman in an old-fashioned nurse's uniform stood there. The uniform was stark white, but faded with age, with a small cap perched neatly on her head. It was in the modern scrubs everyone wore now. It was the kind of uniform Emily had only seen in black and white photographs from decades ago. The woman's skin was pale, almost waxy, and her lips curled into a faint smile. "Late night, dear?" the old nurse said softly. Her voice was calm but carried a strange weight, like every word was deliberate. Emily forced a polite smile. "Yes." "Quiet shift. Are you covering another ward tonight?" The old nurse didn't answer. She slowly turned her head toward the door to room 6. "He doesn't have much time left," she said, her voice dropping to a whisper. "You should sit with him." Emily frowned. Room 6? That was Mr. Harris's room. An elderly man recovering from surgery. He had been doing well earlier in the evening, even joking with her about the hospital food. Before Emily could ask anything else, the old nurse turned and walked away. Her footsteps were so soft now that they barely made a sound. Within seconds, she had disappeared around the corner. Feeling unsettled, Emily went straight to room 6. She found Mr. Harris awake but looking pale and weak. His breathing was shallow and sweat beaded on his forehead. "Mr. Harris, are you feeling okay?" she asked, moving closer. He looked at her with wide, frightened eyes. "The nurse, she told me it's time." Emily's stomach tightened. "What nurse?" "The one in the old white uniform," he whispered. "She's been here every night this week, standing in the corner, watching me." Before Emily could respond, the heart monitor next to his bed began beeping wildly. His heart rate plummeted. She hit the emergency call button and tried to comfort him, but within moments, Mr. Harris went still. The doctor arrived, but it was too late. Mr. Harris was gone. After the body was taken away, Emily told the doctor about the strange nurse she had seen. His face lost all color. "Emily, there's no one on staff who wears that kind of uniform," he said quietly. "But I've heard stories from the older nurses. Decades ago, there was a nurse named Margaret. She was known for sitting with dying patients in their final moments, holding their hands until they passed. She died of an illness. Right here in room 6. Emily didn't want to believe it. She went straight to the security office and asked to see the camera footage from the hallway. When the screen lit up, her skin prickled with goosebumps. The footage showed Emily standing alone in the corridor, talking to empty space. There was no sign of the old nurse. That night, Emily couldn't shake the image of Nurse Margaret's pale smile. It wasn't malicious. If anything, it felt peaceful, almost like she was guiding Mr. Harris somewhere. Over the next few weeks, Emily began to notice a pattern. Patients who were near the end often whispered the same thing. "The old nurse is here," and within hours they would be gone. One night, Emily heard the slow, familiar thump, thump, thump again. She didn't turn to look. She didn't need to. She already knew who it was. Some people said it was a haunting. Others believed it was a blessing. Emily wasn't sure what to think. But she knew one thing. When Nurse Margaret walked those halls, someone in the hospital would not live to see the sunrise. The elevator that skips a floor, it was well past midnight at Riverside General Hospital. The long corridors were dim, lit only by the cold white glow of the emergency lights. Most wards were quiet, except for the distant beeping of monitors and the occasional echo of footsteps from the night staff. Nurse Daniel was moving between floors, checking in on patients. Normally, he took the stairs. The elevators in this hospital had a reputation for being slow and unreliable. But that night, carrying a heavy tray of medical supplies, he decided to use the service elevator. He pressed the button for the third floor, where the ICU was located. The elevator shuddered, its doors closed, and it began to move. Only it didn't stop on the third floor. The floor display above the doors blinked strangely. B1, B2, B3. Daniel frowned. There is no basement 3, he thought. It'd been working here for years. The hospital only had 2 basement levels, one for storage, the other for the morgue. The elevator finally stopped, and the doors slid open with a groan. A wave of cold air swept in, carrying a faint smell of rot and something metallic like rust or dried blood. The lights outside flickered dimly, revealing a long hallway lined with old wooden doors. The walls were covered in peeling paint, and the floor was a faded black and white tile. It looked nothing like the modern hospital floors upstairs. Daniel's heart began to race. He thought about stepping out, but decided against it. Instead, he reached for the panel to close the doors. That's when he saw the shadow. It was at the far end of the hallway, tall, thin, and unnaturally still. It didn't move, but Daniel could feel it watching him. The elevator doors began to close, but just before they shut completely, the shadow twitched. It stretched unnaturally, like a smear of ink spreading across the floor. Daniel's finger frantically hit the close button. The doors slammed shut, and the elevator jolted upward. When the doors opened again, he was on the 3rd floor. Everything looked normal. Nurses walked past, and the smell of antiseptic replaced the foul odor from below. Danielle tried to explain to a colleague what happened, but she just shook her head. "You took the old service elevator, didn't you?" she asked. "Don't ever do that at night. Sometimes it skips floors. And if it takes you to a place you've never seen before, don't step out. People who do, don't come back." She went on to tell him about an incident years ago. A doctor on the night shift had taken the same elevator and never returned. Security footage showed him entering, but the elevator stopped at an unlisted floor before continuing up. When the doors opened at his destination, the doctor was gone. For the next few nights, Daniel avoided the elevator completely. But curiosity aided him. One evening, when the hospital was quiet, he went to the archives room. There, he found blueprints of the hospital from decades ago. To his shock, there had been a 3rd basement level, now sealed off. It had been part of an experimental psychiatric ward in the 1950s. The story said it was shut down after a fire, but whispers among older staff claimed something far darker had happened there. Patient disappearances, unexplained deaths, and a staff member who went mad. Daniel tried to push the memory away, but every time he walked past the elevator, he swore he could feel cold air seeping out from the cracks between the doors, and hear faint, slow footsteps echoing from somewhere far below. One night, months later, he was helping transport a sedated patient when the other nurse suggested using the service elevator. Daniel hesitated but followed. As soon as the doors closed, the floor display began to blink. B1, B2, B3. Daniel's blood ran cold. This time, the doors didn't open right away. The elevator sat still, humming quietly as if deciding whether to let them out. And in that humming silence, Daniel heard a whisper. Low, broken, and coming from the other side of the doors. "Come back." The other nurse looked pale, frozen in place. Neither of them touched the controls. After what felt like hours, the elevator jerked violently, and the doors opened to the 2nd floor instead. Daniel never used that elevator again. And to this day, if he's working late and hears the cables humming in the shaft, he walks the other way. Because he knows some floors in that hospital were never meant to be visited again. The patient who checked out years ago, it was a rainy Thursday night at St. Clair's Hospital. The storm outside had knocked out power in some parts of the city, and the hospital was running on backup generators. The hallways were dim, and the emergency lights gave everything a sickly yellow glow. Nurse Evelyn was working the night shift in the recovery ward, where post-surgery patients were kept. Most of the rooms were full, but room 9 at the end of the hall had been empty for months. The door was always kept locked because the hospital was short-staffed and didn't want to waste time cleaning unused rooms. Around 2 a.m., Evelyn was going through patient charts when the intercom crackled to life. "Nurse, room 9 needs assistance," a deep voice said. Evelyn frowned. Room 9 is empty. She checked the assignment sheet to be sure. No one had been placed there in months. Thinking it might be a prank or a mistake, she ignored it. But 5 minutes later, the call light above room 9 started flashing red. Evelyn hesitated, then decided to check it out. When she reached the door, she noticed something strange. It was unlocked.
Slowly, she pushed it open.
Inside, the room looked as if it had been in use for years. The bed was neatly made, but there was a man sitting upright, staring out the window. He looked to be in his late 50s, pale, with dark circles under his eyes. He wore an old hospital gown. Not the kind they currently used, but one from decades ago. "Sir? Are you all right?" Evelyn asked. The man turned his head slowly. His voice was low and tired. "They said I could leave today, but it's still raining." Evelyn glanced at the chart holder by the door. It was empty. She asked for his name, and he replied, "Martin Keene, checked in 1987. Heart surgery. They said I wouldn't make it." Evelyn's stomach turned. She had never heard of him. "Who told you you could leave?" The night nurse. "She said I could go home, but I can't find the door." Uneasy, Evelyn excused herself and went to the records office. She typed his name into the database. The result made her skin crawl. Martin Keene had been admitted in 1987 for heart surgery. He had died on the operating table. His body had been taken to the morgue that was now located 2 floors below room 9. When Evelyn returned to room 9, the man was gone. The bed was perfectly made and the air was freezing cold. She told the charge nurse what happened, but the older woman just sighed. "Room 9 has been like that for years," she said. "Some nights, Martin comes back. He thinks he's still waiting to be discharged. Never follow him if he asks you to help him find the exit." Evelyn couldn't shake the feeling of dread. For the next few weeks, she avoided going near room 9 at night. But one evening, while delivering medication, she heard footsteps behind her. Turning, she saw Martin walking slowly down the hallway, leaving wet footprints on the tile, even though it wasn't raining outside. He stopped and looked at her. "The night nurse is late. Can you help me find the door?" Evelyn's heart pounded. Remembering the warning, she shook her head and stepped aside. Martin's face darkened. "No one ever helps me. That's why I'm still here." He walked past her and disappeared around the corner. When Evelyn followed seconds later, the hallway was empty. But the wet footprints continued all the way to the locked stairwell that led down to the old morgue. 1 month later, a new nurse joined the ward. Evelyn forgot to warn her about room 9. One night, the call light above the door flashed, and the new nurse went inside. She didn't return for almost an hour. When she finally came back, her face was pale and her hands were shaking. Evelyn pulled her aside and asked what happened. The nurse whispered, "I helped a man find the door. I walked into the stairwell, but when I turned to say goodbye, he was gone and the stairwell door was locked." From then on, Evelyn made sure every new staff member knew the rule. Never answer the call from room 9 after midnight. And if you ever meet Martin Keene in the hallway, don't help him find the exit, because some patients never really leave. The crying in the maternity wing at St. Clair's Hospital, was usually the happiest part of the building. During the day, you could hear the soft chatter of nurses, the gentle beeping of monitors, and the occasional joyful cries of newborn babies. But at night, the wing felt completely different. The halls were darker, quieter. Some nurses swore the air felt heavier. Nurse Laura had worked in maternity for 3 years and thought she had heard every strange hospital rumor. But one night, she experienced something she could never explain. It was just past midnight. The ward only had 2 new mothers with their babies, and both were sleeping soundly in their rooms. Laura was at the nurse's station finishing up her chart notes when she heard it, a faint muffled crying sound. At first, she assumed one of the babies had woken up. She walked to room 3, where baby Amelia was sleeping. But the child was peaceful, her tiny chest rising and falling with each breath. Laura smiled and quietly closed the door. Then the crying came again, this time from the opposite end of the hallway. She went to room 5, where the other baby, Jacob, was resting. His mother was asleep too. Jacob was perfectly calm, yet the sound of crying was now louder, and it was coming from the empty end of the corridor. Laura's skin prickled. The last 2 rooms down there hadn't been used for months. She slowly walked toward them, her shoes squeaking softly on the polished floor. The crying grew clearer. It wasn't the sharp cry of a newborn, but softer, almost like a baby was whimpering. She reached the very last room, room 12, and found the door slightly ajar. She pushed it open. The room was dark, except for the faint glow of moonlight from the window. In the middle of the room sat an old hospital bassinet. It was the older style, metal and glass covered in dust. Inside was a small bundle wrapped in a faded blue blanket. Laura's breath caught in her throat. She stepped closer. The bundle moved. Very slowly, Laura peeled back part of the blanket and found nothing inside. The crying had stopped. The bassinet was empty. Her heart racing, she quickly left the room, shutting the door firmly behind her. When she returned to the nurse's station, she tried to convince herself it had been her imagination. But then the crying started again, only this time it was right behind her. Laura spun around. The hallway was empty. She felt a cold rush of air pass by her as if someone had walked through her. The sound of soft crying drifted down the hall toward room 12 again. The next morning, Laura told her co-worker, Nurse Marlene, about the incident. Marlene looked uneasy. "You don't know about room 12?" she asked. Laura shook her head. Marlene sighed. 20 years ago, a young mother came in to give birth. Complications happened during delivery, or the baby didn't make it. They placed him in a bassinet in room 12, while they tried to comfort the mother. But before she could even hold him, she passed away too. Some say she never left. They hear her rocking the empty bassinet at night, still looking for her child. Laura felt a chill run down her spine. A week later, Laura was working the night shift again. She avoided going anywhere near room 12, but at around 2 a.m., the call light for the room turned on. She froze. No one was assigned to room 12. The light kept blinking. The crying began again, soft and desperate. Against her better judgment, Laura decided to check, just to be sure no one had accidentally been put there. When she opened the door, the bassinet was gone. The room was completely empty, just bare walls and a clean bed. She turned to leave. And there, in the corner, was the faint outline of a woman holding a small bundle in her arms. The woman's face was pale, her eyes hollow. She rocked the bundle gently, whispering something Laura couldn't hear. The crying had stopped, replaced by the sound of the woman humming a lullaby. Laura backed out of the room, shutting the door quickly. When she returned with another nurse minutes later, the room was empty again, whenever she works the night shift. Laura makes sure never to answer the call light for room 12. And if she hears the crying again, she knows it as not a baby that needs her help. It is a mother who has been searching for her child for 20 years and isn't ready to stop. The surgeon in the abandoned operating room. Every hospital has old rooms that no one uses anymore. Locked storage closets, unused wards, or operating rooms that haven't seen a surgery in decades. At St. Hallows Medical Center, there was one such place. Operating room 6, deep in the oldest part of the hospital. No one worked there anymore. The walls were stained from years of use. The ceiling lights had long gone dark, and the air always smelled faintly of antiseptic, no matter how long the room had been closed. Nurse David first heard about the room during his first week on the night shift. Her older orderly told him, "Don't go into OR 6. Some say the surgeon never left." David laughed it off, thinking it was just an attempt to spook the new guy. But one night, he found himself delivering supplies to the far wing of the hospital. He took a wrong turn and ended up in front of a heavy metal double door. The faded plaque read, "Operating Room 6. The hallway was quiet. But David thought he heard faint clinking sounds from inside, like metal tools tapping together. He tried the handle. To his surprise, it turned. The door creaked open. The room was dimly lit by a single overhead surgical lamp. A tray of gleaming instruments lay neatly arranged on a table. Scalpel, forceps, clamps, all perfectly aligned. David frowned. This room was supposed to be empty. "Hello?" he called out. From the shadows at the far end of the room, a tall figure stepped forward. He wore a blood-stained surgical gown, an old-fashioned mask covering his mouth, and a cap pulled low over his eyes. His gloved hands dripped with something dark. "You're late," the man said in a low voice. David froze. "I think you have the wrong person." The surgeon's head tilted. "No, you're just in time. The patient's ready." Before David could move, the lights above the operating table flickered on. There, lying under a white sheet, was a shape. The outline was unmistakable. It was a person. David took a step back. "I think I should call security." The surgeon moved closer, impossibly fast. His gloved hand landed on David's shoulder, gripping it tightly. "No phones in my operating room." David tried to pull away, but the man's grip was like iron. The faint sound of a heart monitor beeped somewhere in the room, but there was no machine connected to anything. Then, the patient on the table sat up. It wasn't a person. It was a body bag. The zipper slowly slid down by itself, and the smell of rot filled the room. Inside was nothing but darkness. No body, just an empty void. The surgeon turned to David. "We've been waiting for you." David shoved the man's hand off and bolted for the door. The hallway outside was completely different now. The walls were older, the lights dimmer, and the smell of disinfectant was overpowering. He ran until he found a stairwell, bursting through the doors and slamming them behind him. When he finally reached the nurse's station, his co-workers looked at him in confusion. "David, where have you been? We've been looking for you for 2 hours." He glanced at the clock. Only 10 minutes had passed since he'd entered OR6. Later, David asked the older orderly about the surgeon. The man's face went pale. In the 1960s, there was a brilliant surgeon who worked in OR6. He was obsessed with saving lives, even if it meant crossing lines. One night, he tried an unapproved experimental surgery. Both the patient and the surgeon died on the table. They closed the room after that. But some nights, people say he's still in there, looking for his next operation. David never went near that part of the hospital again. But sometimes, while making his rounds, he swears he hears the faint sound of metal tools clinking together, and he knows the surgeon is still waiting for someone else to walk into OR6